Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. Today I'm talking about the Fantastic Four during the Copper Age. Ages of comics are a little bit ill-defined. It depends on who you're speaking to or what you're reading as to when the start times of a given age was and when the end times are. So for the purposes of this video, I am calling the Copper Age the decade of the 80s. And for the Fantastic Four, that meant starting with issue number 214 and ending with issue 334. It was a rough start for the Fantastic Four because they had 4 different writers over the course of 18 books. The first writer was Marv Wolfman, who I feel he may have left Fantastic Four by this point in time, and these were just the scripts that he handed in before he left. He had problems with the editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, and so Wolfman and George Perez, left to start up New Teen Titans over at DC, which was a sales juggernaut for DC Comics. So the first 2 books are written by Marv Wolfman at the tail end. He was credited as being the plotter of the next issue, which Bill Mantlo came in and finished the script. Bill Mantlo then went on to write a couple more issues. And then John Byrne stepped in before his 5-year run to write a couple of issues. And then it tailed off with Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz. I would be looking forward most to that particular run, but it failed to deliver. I don't think Doug Moench caught the characterization of the Fantastic Four all that well, and the stories were rather pedestrian and not as cosmic or grand or adventurous as you might come to expect with the Fantastic Four. I have a feeling because Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz were working on Moon Knight at the time, and Moon Knight is very opposite to the Fantastic Four. Moon Knight is very urban, street-level character with little in the way of superpowers. A little bit of the supernatural element, but it's much more of a moody, street-level type of book. Very, very different than the Fantastic Four. Their mindset could have still been locked in there, and they didn't fully explore the cosmic nature of the Fantastic Four. But during their run, they did write issue number 226, which I don't know if they were mandated to write this issue or they chose to do it. I have a feeling it was probably in the, you must write this issue here because this wraps up the Shogun Warriors storyline, a short-lived series based on a toy. And this is where it comes to an end in issue 226. I was a little disappointed with the Bill Sienkiewicz work because I like his artwork, but I think the inker that they chose was the wrong inker. It was Joe Sinnott, and he didn't seem to grasp the whole distortion, slightly surrealistic, deep shading that Bill Sienkiewicz work benefits most from. He sort of like eliminated all of that and gave us a generic-looking Fantastic Four. So I don't think that it's Sienkiewicz's best work, but I don't think that's his fault because I think it was a poor inking choice. But in issue 232, John Byrne began his 5-year run as writer and artist. This run of John Byrne's, often cited as the second golden age of the Fantastic Four. There will be some people that will say that the Jonathan Hickman stories were the best after Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and there are some that would make an argument for current writer Ryan North. But in so far, a number of people would cite the John Byrne though as being the second best Fantastic Four run, and it ran for 5 years. What makes this run so good? He brings back the cosmic feel of the Fantastic Four. They deal with major cosmic threats like Galactus and the Skrulls, Annihilus, and they reinvigorate Doctor Doom. The characterization it really works on character level. This series, and he had a good sense of who the characters were and developed the characters. And I think Doctor Doom probably benefited just as much as the main members of the Fantastic Four. His storyline is as big a part of this 5-year run as the Fantastic Four. One of the things about the run itself is it's one huge storyline, but it's not so much that you can't pick up an issue and read an issue. There's stories within the stories. There's the overarching storyline itself, and then individual issues, and sometimes 2 or 3 issues. They will tell a story, but in the background, or sometimes even in the foreground, is this rather larger scale scoped story. It is one complete tale with a lot of individual stories within. And you would get a story, and even in this one here, for example, there's a subplot that is started, and at some point in time, John Byrne will revisit that subplot, either adding to it or bringing it to a conclusion. And when it does come to a conclusion, there will be another subplot in that issue leading you into the next issue. There is often more than one subplots going on at a time. The other benefit of this particular run is that John Byrne himself did the artwork. Not only did he do the pencils, but he did the majority of the inking as well, and he has never looked better than in this particular run. It's a great run for reading and for the visual storytelling as well. A wonderful run. A lot of things happen in this run as well. That was the first of the John Byrne run, and then funny to think of it now because we're like 60 years into the Fantastic Four, but this is the 20th anniversary issue. With John Byrne did the cover. It was a Doom story. It was a very good Doom story, but there was, as you can see, all the characters on the front. Nice cover for all of that. There were some interesting characters brought in here. This cover, I know it's a cheeky cover. This is, Dr. Doom's not in here, and he's not. But it's important because Frankie Ray, who is the girlfriend of the Human Torch, Johnny Storm, discovers that she actually has the powers of a Human Torch, and therefore becomes a female version of the Human Torch. This story's a little contrived, but it is superhero stuff, and so there's connections to the creator of the original android Human Torch, Phineas Horton, I believe his name is, and I think Frankie Ray ends up being his niece or something like that. Anyways, that's the connection there. And this is where she becomes a Human Torch, but there's further changes still to come for her. A great Galactus cover, and a great Galactus story, often again cited as the second best Galactus story written. I do like this cover. I think this is a very good image of Galactus. But it's the next issue that makes a mark. This is probably the money issue of the entire run, because this is where Galactus takes Frankie Ray and turns her into the Herald Nova. I'm not positive, because I think that Nova was killed at some recent books or somewhere along the line, but that doesn't mean a great deal in the comic book world. People die and come back all the time, but this is the first time that she becomes the Herald of Galactus, and that, unlike what's happened to the Avengers, where everybody who has any kind of power becomes an Avenger, it is a very select few who become Heralds of Galactus. I think that is reason enough to take note of this particular book, and it is the one that is the money book in this entire Copper Age run. I don't know, we'll talk about that later, but like $40 maybe? John Byrne was experimental, and he did this entire book on its side. Just wanted to point out that was issue 252. And you know me, I like the cover swipes of Fantastic Four #1, and this is another one, but this time the Mole Man is on their side. A few other changes happened, which is interesting, because John Byrne did say that he thought that the Thing was essential to the Fantastic Four, like a very important character. And yet, here we are up in issue 265, and the Thing. This is after the Secret Wars takes place, and the Thing decides to stay behind on Battleworld. And who takes his place but the She-Hulk? And actually, I think Byrne did a great job with the She-Hulk, and then he went on to write her own the sensational She-Hulk, which has got a lot of acclaim as well. But I think her addition to the Fantastic Four, it's probably exactly the thing that Jim Shooter was looking for, because he wanted to bring a whole newness to established characters. And this would be one of those situations where, you're used to seeing the Thing in the Fantastic Four, and now you've got the She-Hulk. As Byrne expressed, he said that they perform the same job in the team, but they come at it from a different direction, different attitude. I think her inclusion was fresh, and he handled the situation well with the characters as well as with the She-Hulk herself. It gave Sue another person to spring off of as well, which was good, and it was played up from time to time. I did like her inclusion in the Fantastic Four, and this is the one where she first shows up, 265. A minor character, Reed Richards' father, Nathaniel Richards, shows up in this issue here, 272. This is his first cameo, and then he's got his first full appearance in the next issue. There was some buzz about this book at some point in time, but I don't think that too many other books are going to use Nathaniel Richards. This would be the full appearance of Nathaniel Richards, 273. A number of characters in the Marvel Universe have gone under the name of Malice. This is the entity Malice, is the first appearance of this particular Malice that takes over Sue Storm and triggers all of her bad thoughts into physical manifestations. It did bring about, or start the trigger of a change in Sue Storm. And I think she probably grew the most through John Byrne's run. I liked how he handled her and the development of her character. I think that he did move her forward, and a lot of what Sue Storm is today could be tracked back to this particular run. This book is not an expensive book, but I consider it the most important book in this entire run, in an entire decade. It's the issue. I'm not crazy about the cover. It's the issue where the Invisible Girl states that she's no longer the Invisible Girl. From here on in, she's the Invisible Woman. And she expresses that she's changed and grown from the time that she was in the 60s in the beginning books, and that she feels herself to be a stronger person, and she wants to vocalize that and make it a fact by changing her name from a girl to a woman. So from here on in, she's known as the Invisible Woman. This is the issue where she makes that decree. I think it's an important issue, but it doesn't have the same sort of value as, say, the first appearance of Nova. There are a couple of other issues. This is part of the Phoenix Rising sort of thing when Jean Grey comes back into the fold. This is part 2 of 3. This would be the last time that John Byrne did both writing and art on the book, on issue 293. It was a good series. All of the stories were good. I don't think that he misfired on any of them throughout the 5-year run. This is the last one that he wrote on, and I will say that there's a Tigra cameo in here for those that are tracking Tigra. So it was an excellent run, and it's well worth the read. that 5-year run of John Byrne. It's well worth a read if you're a Fantastic Four fan, and it's also well worth a read if you are just a fan of the superhero genre. And if you want to start with anywhere with the Fantastic Four, you don't want to go all the way back down to the Silver Age, then I would recommend this Copper Age by John Byrne. There you go. 25th anniversary issue. A lot of these issues are there. You can tell these issues because they've got that nice little border all the way around there. So here we go. John Byrne was there for the 20th anniversary, and he was just finishing up at the 25th anniversary. Steve Englehart took over as Roy Thomas wrote a couple of bad issues after Byrne. Afterwards at Roger Stern. I think it was Roger. Steve Englehart then did the bulk of the books remaining, basically from about 303 to 333 or something like that. And he took it in a different direction. This is where he introduced the new Fantastic Four. In Byrne's run, Sue Storm had a miscarriage. She had gone through traumatic events with the Psycho Man, changing her name from Invisible Girl to Invisible Woman. So Reed and Sue just said, you know what, we're just going to take a break from everything. So they backed away from the Fantastic Four. And replacements ended up being Crystal and the Thing's friend, wrestling friend, Ms. Marvel. So the team now consisted of the Thing, Ms. Marvel, Human Torch, and Crystal. And this is what they look like here in issue 307, but the changes were happening very soon. And by very soon, I mean like in issue 310, you can see how the Thing has changed into a much more rough, lumpy sort of character. But the big change is that Ms. Marvel turns into the She-Thing. Now, Spider-Woman was successful and She-Hulk was successful. May have been the thinking, well, let's make a She-Thing because the Thing is a pretty popular character. I don't think it worked all that well. I don't think the She-Thing was that interesting a character. I think you have to build a character and just giving them the powers. Although it was, Steve Englehart did try to do something different with her, with the idea that she had become the Thing, or the She-Thing, and hated it, and really wanted, as she thought she, so ugly, so like her whole life is going to be dramatically altered in a way that she does not want it altered. So it's the conversations between the Thing and the She-Thing, as he tries to explain to her how life is and what are the positive aspects are, and bring her back into the world of humanity. So there was some nice aspects to that whole run, but most of it was without having the cosmic nature of Reed Richards, the desire for exploration and adventure, especially at a cosmic level. This was just a group of 4 heroes, grounded, dealing with, physical forces as opposed to mental and astral and all the other stuff that comes with being part of the Fantastic Four when Reed Richards is around. It didn't quite work for me. I've in the early Strange Tales from the 60s, the Human Torch had a feature, and he was soon teamed up with the Thing, and they had sort of light adventures. And Fantastic Four, with Steve Englehart with this new team, I don't know that I would call them light adventures, but they certainly weren't of the cosmic nature that you were used to from John Byrne or all the way back to Stan Lee, or even some of the stuff from the 70s. This really did not work that well for me, and I don't recommend Steve Englehart's run, just from a reader point of view. But the 80s ended on a good note. Walt Simonson took over. This is the first issue that he did for the Fantastic Four, and then he starts into the 90s, which is a fun read, and we'll get to that when we talk about the 90s. So it ended on a good note with Walt Simonson doing both the art and the stories. So overall, is it worth a read? Yes, for the John Byrne stuff. Not so much for the first 18 issues of the Steve Englehart stuff that finished up. However, if you are a Fantastic Four fan like myself, then you'll want to read it all for the history. This is at a time when canon still meant something, when the past affected the books moving forward. I've read some of the books. I mean, really, when you think about it, comic books are like 60 years old. The Marvel universe, 80 years for the DC universe. You really can't include everything that's happened to these characters and expect that they've only aged 3 or 4 years or whatever the situation is. It's very difficult. And some of the storylines change characters and things so dramatically. How can you go back from that and then say, no, it's okay, we're going to be more like this again? So continuity, I don't think it's as strong now as it was when this book was being written. I think that pretty much the continuity started to fall apart probably late 90s, early 2000s. I haven't read enough of the last 15 years worth of books to see just how dramatically altered it's become, but the stuff that I've read looks like it's cut out certain aspects of the past to fit the new narrative. Anyway, so for a reading point of view, yep, the John Byrne stuff, not so much the other stuff. The speculator point of view, the one that you want to be looking at is the Frankie Ray when she becomes Nova. That's currently the money book here in this collection. And again, it's not worth a ton of money, $40 or $50, maybe less, 25. Following that, you have the Nathaniel Richards, which I don't think is really that big, but you did get some nods towards him when the movies were talked about, etc. So, and then the long shot, of course, is the first appearance of the She-Thing. I still think that the best book, and perhaps the most important book, is when it was issue 284, when the Invisible Girl becomes the Invisible Woman. That's not reflected in the marketplace, but I do think that's, if I was going to talk about what's a key book, that would be a key book. I think the Nova is a key book too. I don't think that the appearance of Nathaniel Richard is really a key. The market says it is. But those two books would be key. Becoming the Invisible Woman doesn't really seem to make too much of a dent in the marketplace. Would I get any of these books if I was going to look? Would I get any of them encased in plastic? Would I get any of them graded? And my answer would be no. I would rather spend the money on the Nova one. This is the one I would be interested in getting. I would rather buy a few copies of that in high grade. And if it becomes a demand book, you'd have some that you could get graded. But I wouldn't go out of my way to grade them now. So, this whole collection, if I was to take a look at buying this collection, how much would you end up spending? Well, if you averaged $5 a book, you'd be looking at $500 to $600, well, like $600, but you'd have to throw in a few more dollars for some of the other ones. So you could probably buy the entire 80s run of the Fantastic Four for in between $600 and $1,000. Less if you're lucky and you found a good deal somewhere and you did only get them for $5 a piece. You could probably find some of these for less than $5 a piece. So you could get under there. But that's what it would cost you to buy the entire run during this time. That's about it that I've got to say for the Fantastic Four: The Copper Age. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again later. I hope.